Welcome to the Mitchell Center for Sustainability Solutions Sustainability Talk Series. My name is David Hart. I'm the director here. It's great to have you with us. So now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Bill Ginn. Bill, I don't know exactly how far he can throw a stone, but I'm guessing he grew up a stone's throw from Cleveland, Ohio, where it sounds like he experienced the joy of exploring the woods as well as the anguish of watching those magical places transformed by development. And that's me guessing what he felt like. And the reason I can guess that way is because I had exactly that same experience where I grew up. He received his undergraduate degree in human ecology as a member of the College of Atlantic's first graduating class. Believe it or not, there were only 2 students in that class. Early days. Bill has worked for decades at the intersection between the environment and business, including as former director of Maine Audubon, founder of a recycling company focused on organic waste, several leadership roles with the Nature Conservancy, including chief conservation officer, during which time he helped create innovative forest conservation projects right here in the Northeast United States, but also the South Pacific and many other parts of the world. In his spare time, which I don't know that he had much of or has, he has written 2 books published by Island Press, one of my favorite publishers, one titled Investing in Nature, that he was kind enough to give me a copy of years ago when he gave another wonderful talk at UMaine, and Valuing Nature, a more recent book. Please join me in welcoming Bill to the Mitchell Center.
Well, listen, thank you for joining me both in person and if there's anybody on Zoom. I'm glad to have you with me here today. I'm honored, of course, to speak at the Mitchell Center. I really like the framing of the Mitchell Center around solutions. So many of these things are called studies. But solutions is really what we need to be focused on here. It's what I'm all about, not just studying problems, but looking for ways to solve problems that face society. And of course, I don't think I need to outline for you the tremendous challenges that we face. It seems like there are new issues every day for those of us who are focused on the environment and on sustainability. And that, of course, is very, very challenging. But of course, if you have a long view, which I now at my age have a long view, you recognize that that takes a long time to create change. And starting in my youth with the civil rights movement, and I think we've made enormous progress there. Of course, Vietnam War was a dominant theme in my era, and so many other things that we could name. These are all challenges, but ones that I think over time we have advanced society and have improved the world in which we live in. I had a chance to glance at a book the other day that was written by Charles Dickens in 1859, just a few years before this esteemed university was founded, I noticed. And the name, you probably know Charles Dickens from Ebenezer Scrooge and Christmas Carol, but the book that I'm thinking about is called The Tale of Two Cities. And The Tale of Two Cities is sort of an epic. It's fictional, but an epic story of basically a clash of cultures. So on one hand, you have the French Revolution, Paris, deep in the throes of, a century-long upheaval around the rights of people. And then you have London on the other side, the aristocracy and the landed gentry and the factory workers. So you have this clash of cultures that he writes about, and he writes about the family there. And as I was thinking about that, I thought, well, this is really something that is really true today. We often these forums speak about the two mains, the urban Portland and the rural Aroostook County, to pick the two extremes. And I think today we can say truly that, we're dealing with two countries. I've never seen such a divided country with such, different perspectives about. Well, here's the opening sentence to that novel, which I think really frames the discussion that I think we should have today. Here's the opening sentence. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom and the age of foolishness. And I think that perfectly frames where we are today in our society. We have both the best of times and the worst of times. Certainly we have a lot of wisdom, but we have a lot of foolishness going on in society. Now, I'm not going to spend a long time going through the question of why this is the worst of times, because, frankly, I'm a little bored with that conversation. As I said, one of the things that attracts me to be here is the focus on solutions. But in order to frame the argument, I think we just have to recap quickly some of the key points here that we need to keep in mind. If we talk about worst and foolish, in my opinion, climate change, the debate around that is an example of that. And the foolishness is passing laws that says you can't even talk about it, as Florida has, for example, and as the federal government trying to do. Another example of the worst of times, I think, is our critical shortage of water across the world. More than a third of the people in this world are water starved. And that's just not a issue of other places. It is, the American West. Large parts of this country are facing tremendous water shortages. Doesn't feel like it in Maine, maybe, but that is absolutely true. And the foolishness is to say, well, you just open the dam gates on Lake Mead and Los Angeles's water problem is solved. Well, the foolishness is, there's no more water. You're just moving water around to somewhere else. And of course, the issue of food security is a huge one. And we're going to see that really strongly in a very local sense here, I think, in the state of Maine and in the rest of the country. But if you blow up further and take a longer term view, the general consensus is that we need about 50% more food than we are producing today in the world in order to take the 7 billion people that we have today and move it to the 9, 10, 12 billion people that we expect to have just by the laws of demographics. And at the same time, move the food insecure up to a basic sense of nutrition. And of course, the foolishness there is the U.S. abandoning its whole foreign aid program, particularly in places like Africa, which is the fastest growing continent on the planet and one that has just huge food security issues. And finally, the war against research development that's happening, in universities like this, but also, EPA's entire science staff canceled. Many of the baseline data that we run the economy on, from the consumer price index and employment numbers all the way to how many people truly are food insecure in this country. All those research is being abandoned. This is the ultimate foolishness, in my opinion, because that which drives what I would say is the American story of excellence has been universities like this, researchers who focus on and are bringing new ideas forward. So to me, these are all examples of why this is the worst time and why we are filled with such foolishness in our perspective about the future. But what do we do about that? And what are the solutions? Well, I would make the case to you that at the same time, it's just terrible things are happening in this world. This is actually the greatest time. It is truly the best of time. And there is so much opportunity and so much wisdom that is available to you all. And I'm very excited for all of you who are emerging professionals and the work and opportunities that you have ahead. Of course, part of that is we have all these tools that didn't even exist, 10 years ago, from CRISPR to, AI bots to, you name it. We have tools that no one could have dreamed of. That is, really a huge, huge advantage. All of these problems that I just went down are also huge opportunities to solve those problems. And I would contend to you that this is probably, since the Industrial Revolution 200 years ago, this is probably the time of the greatest change and the greatest opportunity for innovation that has, been present. And you are living right in the midst of that. I'm really only sorry for myself because I'm at the end of my career. And what I would love to be is at the beginning of my career, to see the opportunities and to be able to engage and work on those things. So it'll be easy for you to be, I suppose, disillusioned by the tremendous pressure on universities and nonprofits and the hard job market out there. But don't forget, this is an extraordinary moment. We have extraordinary opportunities to work on them. Just the ones that I'm excited about personally, the energy transition. In 20 years, how we power this planet is going to be completely different. Notwithstanding current administration's focus on bringing back coal, that ain't going to happen. Solar is already by far and away, 56% of the new energy in the last 5 years is solar. It produced 15% of the energy in the world last year. That's an amazing transformation. And it's all because solar is cheaper than any other source of power, because the fuel is free. I mean, it's had tremendous negative consequences in Maine for the wood fuel industry, for example, which has really struggled because it's a high price of fuel, but solar has no fuel. So the energy transition is just a huge opportunity, whether it's batteries, whether it's new sources of energy, building efficiency, something that Julie and I were just talking about. She's, where her day job, she says, is working in an architectural firm that really focuses on passive house design. But we have, one of the big problems of buildings, and this is a problem for this university, is these buildings are still here 100 years later. And how do you retrofit them and make them better than they are? But we have this opportunity today to build new buildings that are enormously transformative. Buildings use a third of the energy in the world. They're just massive hogs of energy. So we have this opportunity to transform the building industry. Transportation, again, this is the ultimate foolishness. Electric vehicles are going to win. There's just no question about it. Internal combustion engines are going to be dinosaurs in your lifetime. You may never own anything other than an electric vehicle, going forward. So there is going to be change. And the simple, I just saw this the other day, the drivetrain of a Tesla has 20 parts. The drivetrain of an internal combustion engine has 1,000 parts. It's just a whole different technology, a whole simple technology that's going to transform how we move. But it's even more than that, because we're going to be moving, I think, towards the Uberization of our transportation system. And many people will simply not even need to own a car, because they'll call a robo-taxi and they'll, ride share or do whatever. And that whole network is coming. It may take a long time to get to a rural state like Maine, but it is going to come. And so we're going to see an enormous change in the transportation infrastructure. The agricultural systems, as I said, we've got this amazing demand for food resources. And we really have two choices. Do we clear the rainforest, the last rainforest in the Amazon, to grow crops on marginal soils in order to feed the world? Or do we enhance our productivity, efficiency, reduce the waste, as Willliam is working on, in our food systems so that we're delivering those calories to people without destroying the earth? And this is hugely consequential because right now agriculture uses 80% of the water. So when you run short of water, you run short of food. So we've got an opportunity to transform our whole agricultural system towards efficiency. And this is really tough. Just in a sidebar, I worked in India for a long period of time, and we were working on the burning of crop residues. They burn all their crop residues, which depletes the soil of all of its organic matter. But we had a particular technology that we were promoting that allowed them to incorporate rice straw back into the soil. And it really, really worked, but it's very tough. And I said to colleagues, just remember, if this was Iowa, our target would be 2,000 big farms. But because it's India, we have 15 million farms that we have to transform their way of thinking and their way of management. So the scale of change that's required and the work that's required is just huge, even if you have great solutions to bring to bear. So these are all areas that I am excited about, and I hope you are excited about, because this is the real work of sustainable solutions, is to figure out how to move the needle in all of those areas. Now, I want to just show you 3 quick case studies of companies that I'm either a founder of or one of the lead investors in, that I think you might find to be illustrative of what I think we need to do here. I'm going to find my. There we go. Oh, by the way, there's the cover of The Tale of Two Cities. Should have shown that earlier. Too late. All right. So first company, Timber HP. This is a company that makes whole new slate of insulation out of wood fiber. Here's the framing here. Maine is the most forested state in the union. 90% forests. 22 million acres of total land, around 18 million acres, 17 million acres worth of forests. We're on our knees right now. We've lost $5 billion worth of paper company assets over the last several decades. The number of paper mills operating in Maine is now a handful, when, even a decade ago, there were 10 or 15 mills operating here. The demand for paper, you all being in a university know the answer to this is, unless you're delivering boxes for Amazon, the demand for paper is 0. It is really, really tiny. And my kids live, I'm an old school guy. I have to print stuff to own it, but my kids don't even have printers, right? They don't even think about, why should I print this? They live in paper-free houses. It's just not something that is important to their well-being, and all that is trickled through the forest products industry. So here's the problem is, what do we do with this vast resource? I already said it's not energy because it's too expensive to harvest fiber for energy and burn it. We got to find new uses for that. So these are 2 companies that, I'll show you the second one, that are doing this. And so that little insert there is the mill in Madison, the paper mill in Madison. This is a mill that made inserts to the New York Times. And the paper versions of the New York Times have gone, as have all newspapers. The electronic versions of it are sky high. They have more electronic viewers than ever, but they no longer have the need for a whole paper mill devoted to producing the inserts in the Sunday New York Times. It just no longer is necessary. So this is an opportunity for transformation. And my partner, Matt Amalia, who Julia works for, and others came up with this idea of building a plant which would make a high-tech insulation product out of paper fiber. This is something that's already going on in Europe, where about 12% of the market is insulation made from paper fibers. And we said, why not build it in the US? So that's the task that was set forth. We're still working on it. We just turned on the third production line at the mill. We now make the full suite of products, which include bats and blown-in product that competes with products that are blown into wall cavities. A bat, like a fiberglass bat, except much better, and a board product like the blue boards that you see everywhere, but in this case, fully sustainable. And so this is a huge opportunity. This is, a massive industry. And as we re-insulate our buildings and reimagine and the efficiency of our buildings, insulation is absolutely critical to that work. So we have two choices. Do we make it out of all these high energy using products like fiberglass, like foam, or do we make it out of recyclable, renewable resources like wood fiber? And by the way, these products have the same thermal characteristics, and in some cases, even better thermal characteristics than their fiberglass competitors out there. So these products really work, and they really so it's just an example of a business that's founded on transforming how we build buildings. And to me, that's an exciting contribution to the solutions. It's not the full solution, not even any close to it, but it's an example of the opportunities that Maine has to try to change how we operate in this world. And by the way, manufacturing is tough. There's a lot of happy talk about manufacturing, but it is a brutal, hard business to be good at. And we've lost a lot of manufacturing muscle in this country, and we're going to have to work hard to get that back. So I'm very proud of the team at Timber HP that's trying to accomplish that work. A second example is packaging. Packaging is everywhere, as we all know. Maine just passed a law, though, that says that soon you will have to pay a fee for all the packaging you produce which is not recyclable. Oh, that's huge incentive. So that's an example of a policy indicator pushing people to think about new ideas. Well, what if we could produce high quality packaging that could replace plastic, which is the leading competitor, replace styrofoam? This company, located in Saco, Maine, is on the forefront of trying to do that using molded fiber products. Now you're already familiar with this stuff because you had egg cartons, of course. But what if you could produce a much more high quality product than an egg carton, and you could produce it on small volumes? One of the problems with all the molded fiber products in the world today are that you need a market of, tens of millions of them. And that's not good if you're just somebody making, a few thousand of something. How do you get a product that is able to be used, by you at those small volumes? So this company's, niche is to be able to design and produce relatively low volume products that are custom made for your end use and totally replace packaging. Their motto is, say goodbye to plastic. That's to me an example of very exciting business opportunity that again goes back to that fundamental problem of what do we use all these trees for? Well, the answer is let's use them for new kinds of solutions, new kinds of high-tech solutions that really are responsive to and can change the marketplace. Final example, I'm a director of and one of the first investors in Great Northern Salmon. This is a land-based process of raising Atlantic salmon. It's not in the water, it's not in pens in the ocean as you might think most salmon are raised at, but this country right now imports 98% of the salmon that we use from Europe. Of that price that you see in the supermarket, $15, whatever, about $5 to $7 is the cost of air freighting it to the United States. You know, talk about a energy intensive and wasteful process. And why can't we, with our huge maritime history, culture, and skilled workforce, you know, produce some of these products ourselves here in the United States? Well, it's very complicated. And if you follow these stories, you'll see that coastal communities want nothing to do with salmon raising because I think a mistaken belief that it's a conflict with the lobster industry. And that, you know, I appreciate the discussion on that. I don't think it's true, but it is the reality that all of the ocean-based, nearshore, land-based salmon systems have gone nowhere here. Well, we had a different idea, which is to take advantage of the fact that salmon spend half of their life in freshwater and grow perfectly fine in freshwater. You know, they don't need salt water. That's a mistaken notion because that's not the way they're built. And why not put it in a place that has a long history of manufacturing where people welcome the idea of alternative industries that can use their resources. And so we've struck a partnership with the town of Millinocket. We are leasing a site from them. And the first of this land-based salmon systems are under construction as we speak. We're not very fancy right now because we're just clearing the site and getting ready for the start of construction next year. But we're very excited about the partnership with Millinocket, who really wants to see reuse of that mill site. And for our perspective, trying to create alternative sources of food in a world that is, you know, hard pressed to manage its oceans very effectively. I mean, we're probably in the end game of lobsters in this state. The catch has declined now for the last 4 years, and the good times are over, I think. Although high prices and low inputs are allowing fishermen to still make a decent living, I'm not sure that can go on forever. So we're seeing a transition from the traditional stronghold of lobster fishing, which in a way is replaced ground fishing. That is for finfish of the earlier era, all the way back to cod, you know, at the beginning of the white people coming to this continent. So there is an opportunity for us to improve our food system, stop importing stuff from other places and grow it here in this state, and to honor our maritime heritage and history. So that's another example of a problem that you know, we're working on. This is the site you see here that's being cleared right now on the mill site and Atlantic salmon. And by the way, the sister company to this has preserved the genome of the St. John salmon, which is all the salmon aquaculture operations in the world pretty much use European genes. And that's another set of problems because they're using open pen nets in the ocean and they escape and they cause all kinds of, you know, issues with mixing up the gene force. So we're going to be using St. John salmon even though our systems are land-based and not connected to the ocean in any way, so there won't be any contamination that way. We're still going to be using the genes of the fish that are native to here because we think they'll grow better because they spent, millennium evolving to grow in Maine. And so we're really excited about that opportunity in the shadows of Mount Todd. So if I were to have written a manual for this, and I guess I did write a manual for this, called Valuing Nature, published now 5 years ago. A lot of that is sadly out of date because I had a hypothesis in that book that I think, it's lasted for a long time and it's been very powerful. And that hypothesis was that there were 3 main forces here that could shape and draw innovation. The first was government. Government has enormous power to create incentives, tax breaks for energy efficiency, new cars, and the like. They have a lot of policy drivers too, procurement policies and legislative standards, fuel efficiency standards, and building codes and the like. So government has historically been an incredible force here for driving change. Second is nonprofits and universities. The research capability, the innovation, in universities, the seeds of silicon wafers and batteries, are being laid right now that will transform ultimately the future of sustainability across the board. And then finally, business. And I put business there because I think it's really important that we think about this. Because business is the only entity that has the kind of capital and resources to actually implement this. And like it or not, government doesn't farm. It's millions of farmers that farm. Government doesn't build cars. It's businesses that build cars. So we need to figure out how we engage business in the transformation, or else we will not be successful. Well, the reason why my book is out of date is obviously today, government is moving in the exact opposite direction. They've canceled all the incentives for green architecture, for green investments. They're trying to bring back coal. They're trying to block wind and solar. So government has gone from an asset in this transformation to a negative. And you would know much better than I about the crippling effect of all the attacks on our university systems and the research and development capacity in universities like this one. And I know the Mitchell Institute had a major grant canceled to bring solar to Wabanakis. Just to one small example of a huge sweeping change. So universities and it's widely expected that the next target will be nonprofits and trying to strip them of their charitable status, which of course will cripple nonprofits like ones that I work on. And so we have a situation in which 2 of those 3 legs are very weak. And that leaves us with business as the sole potential force of transformation here. And I think you need to pause and think about that for a second, because I think many of you might not have thought, oh, well, is he in business? Maybe the answer is not looking for a job at the university, because there aren't going to be a lot of jobs at the university, or getting more degrees, or working for a nonprofit, because that's going to be really hard too. Maybe part of the answer is, can I think about, and is there a way that the ideas, the solutions that I'm interested in could be implemented through a business solution? Now, just to be clear here, I don't personally think that businesses are about making money. may find that shocking to hear me say that, but businesses are about solving problems. And if you solve those problems really well, you get rewarded by making money. But making money is an indicator of effectiveness. It is not the reasons why business exists. If somebody tells you, well, I'm just in the business of making money, well, forget it. That's not a winning formula to be in business. Businesses must solve problems that people are interested in having solved for them. And if they do that effectively and efficiently, they get rewarded by having access to capital, by making money, by being able to compensate their employees to do this work. So it's a really important idea, really important for all of you to think about the role of entrepreneurs in solving these problems, given the status of all the other forces that we might have relied upon in the past. And I think the three examples that I showed you are examples of, entrepreneurs, not just me, but whole legion of people that made those ideas work, that are trying to solve real problems by using the tools of business to achieve those successes. So as we think about what we do and how we go forward, obviously political action is one form of taking action here, try to resist those changes. And frankly, these universities and people at universities are a sleeping giant. All the movements that I spoke about, the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, and all the others that I can think of, have really been powered by young people making those things happen. I'm not sure I'm seeing that today, frankly. When I look, there's a lot of gray-haired people out there that look an awful lot like the people I knew, 50 years ago. So yes, we need to be motivated and focused on those issues, and we need to step up and engage there. But more can be done. I urge you to think about being an entrepreneur. Think about the skills that you might need in order to do that. How your things that you're interested in might be able to be transformed. I also urge you to think outside of the US. The truth of the matter is there's so much innovation happening in Asia, in Europe, elsewhere across the world, that I think one of the alarming things about this country is how insular we can be, and how we think we are the source of excellence for the world and dominate the world. But the truth is, the opportunities for innovation may very well be outside of this country. So think about not just, I have to find a job in Maine, but think about how I can be part of this global world. Think about products that are not necessarily destined for the US, but somewhere else. Now, a frequent question I get talk about this is, well, how do I get a business idea? What's the business, And I know a lot of people struggle with this, say, yeah, I'm interested in this, but I don't know what to do. Well, I don't have an easy answer for that, but what I would say is, the way I think about it is to ask yourself, what are the problems that I'm interested in solving? Think about it as a set of problems, and what is it that calls to you? It may be healthcare, it may be computer science, it may be agriculture, it may be engineering, whatever the food systems, energy systems, building systems, whatever that is. And then if you know what you want to do in that, what problem you want to work on, that's when you can narrow your search and think about what are the business opportunities that I could participate in. You don't have to start it yourself. There may be other people traveling in that same sphere that are interested in the same problems that you're working on that you can join forces with. But be focused on the problems that you want to contribute to. Okay, so that's, not easy. That's hard. That's really hard work. I'm an optimist. I think we will solve these problems. I think we will live beyond this era that we're in today. It will not be easy, but we will. I recall the works of Theodore Parker, who in 1853, even before Charles Dickens, and this was paraphrased by Martin Luther King in a very famous speech he gave, which I'll read the shorter Martin Luther King version. The arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I really believe that. But there are two important asterisks there. The first asterisk is that it's an arc, not a straight line. And we're seeing part of the fact that those of us who navigate in sailboats and in the fog know that you have to tack sometimes in order to get to the goal. So don't be frustrated by the fact that this is not a linear process. We're going to see, many challenges, and it takes a long time to make change. And this second is, I believe that the bending of the universe is created by people, by human nature. I think that people naturally yearn for a good standard of living, for clean water, for clean air. They naturally yearn for freedom of expression, of justice, be part of that. That is a human yearning. And it's that pushing and pulling that's created by people that bends the universe towards justice and freedom. And that pushing and pulling is a huge job, and one that we all have to be focused on. And how you choose to push and pull, that's up to you. What field you engage in, that's up to you. But I think we have to do that work. That's what I've dedicated my life to working on. And I've had a chance to do that both in nonprofits, in government, and in business. And it's so exciting. I can't tell you how exciting it is to work on real problems and try to find real solutions to those problems. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have and have a little bit of a dialogue with you. So thank you very much. So, David, over to you. I guess if you're going to field any questions that
I've got a ton, but I'm going to hang on to them. Let's start with Francois.
Well, I really enjoyed the seeing these examples of this economic transformation happening in Maine. But I'm very glad at the end you started talking about the internationalization of this. And I wondered if you could put sort of the US's sort of outsized role in the world economic system and what's happening there into this discussion about moving internationally as well as locally or in the US.
Yeah, well, I mean, historically, within the last 2 years, the US has been this magnet for the best and brightest people wanting to come and study and learn and participate. And it's been the place where people come for capital and resources. And, sadly, for, I think, pure foolishness, we are pushing that energy to other places in the world. And I can't change that myself, but I can follow that trend, and I can think about, where will be the new centers of innovation going forward. So I think we are squandering our excellence in this country, and that is a very, very sad thing that I'm beside, myself to see that squandering happening. But for the next period of time, and some of these changes like punitive tariffs and the like that are basically forcing people to, find other markets for their products, other partners for their products and resources, are going to force us for a long period of time to be looking in other markets and other places. So, and it, could be Canada. It doesn't have to be Papua New Guinea. That's where I started working for the Nature Conservancy. It's a great country, by the way. But think about being global in your focus rather than U.S. in your focus. I think that's going to be critical in the next several decades.
Thanks so much for your presentation. It's interesting if you could talk a little bit more about the salmon example. I didn't realize that most salmon was air freighted to the US and, so I mean, I'm curious, I mean, if you could briefly describe the technology a little bit. I was a little curious about what land-based salmon is about, but more interestingly, are there other things like that where we can take advantage of, right now, things are being shipped and there's, if you put it on a efficient freighter, maybe the climate impact of that isn't too great, but like air shipping things is problematic. Like what beyond salmon, what kind of opportunities might be out there?
Well, of course, when you talk about fresh food, then you have an opportunity to, you got to make that time short. But this is true whether you're talking about bananas or apples or whatever, it takes a long, we've developed this global food marketplace. But that has had, many benefits, but let's just bring it back to Maine. I mean, Maine has an opportunity to be self-sufficient in its, in its food supplies. We have just tremendous agricultural resources that are just going to beg in this state. And we have a huge opportunity to invest in year-round growing. We know how to do it. The technology is there. We could be producing so much more of our food here in this very state of Maine. So investing at that level is absolutely critical. So the salmon is just one example, but I think just about every commodity that that we buy from California or from elsewhere could be grown in Maine, or we can find ready substitutes for it, and we could be much more sufficient at the same time reinvesting in our soils and our agricultural opportunities. So there is and it's largely an organic driven process, which has its own benefits and desires. And so we could do so much more in this state. And there is, in fact, a revolution that's occurring right now. I mean, we have more small, for the first time in like 20 years, we have more small farms coming forth than losing. I mean, that, we're bending the curve in the right direction. And that is, very exciting. But at the same time, we're losing the old guard industries like the dairy industry and the potato industry. But why can't we change those curves? Why can't we do more? Why does Wisconsin have to own Chobani yogurt, and cheese? Why can't we be growing those products here in the States? So I guess I advocate first local solutions and trying to reduce those transportation deficits by trying to create those products here in the places where we can really make a huge difference. And the land-based salmon, is, in the end, it's really, glorified tanks, which we could raise fish very, very effectively and very efficiently, and do so in a way that allows you to control all the environmental inputs. So the big downer about salmon is escapees contaminating the gene pool. When you grow it in the ocean, the existing salmon culture, just all that waste from the salmon, just goes right to the bottom, polluting the bottom, and there's no way to treat that waste or control it. And then of course diseases are being introduced from the salmon that are raised in net pens into the wild, like sea lice and other things that cause problems. So if you bring that back to a more controlled environment, you can eliminate those challenges. And why don't we have more of it? Well, there's a real problem. We have a real problem with, not in my backyard. And that's a real challenge for this state. It's what's delaying the development of wind. Lobster fishermen don't want to see it even 30 miles out. People don't want to look out of their summer homes and see it. People certainly don't want to see salmon pens out in front of their sailboat. So we have all these conflicts. Yet there are examples of industries that are growing rapidly that seem to be able to overcome those. So one I'd point to is the oyster cultivation industry. I mean, Maine is just exploding with the growth of oysters as an aquaculture product. The future is in aquaculture. There's many flavors of it, not just, salmon. Happened to be one that I'm interested in, the salmon problem, but I do think that there are so many other aquaculture opportunities and new products like kelp that we have to figure out how do we find markets for something we know how to really grow really, really well, but we don't really know how to sell it and how to use it, in our food system. So we have to, have some real innovation there. So the food sector is just ripe for innovation in powerful and new ways.
Susan, can I just bring in a question or two from the chat?
A lot of questions in the chat, the audience. I'm gonna there's two I think that are related that I'm gonna try to weave together. So one person brought up the idea of greenwashing, or when businesses pay lip service to environmental causes, but maybe do not, in their actions or not, with the cause. And then another commenter asked about how we can encourage investors in these businesses to select for businesses that solve these kinds of problems. So I guess in your experience, how do you go about sort of making that distinction between what's actually solving a problem, what's just paying lip service, and maybe from both as like a concerned citizen and as an investor?
Well, this is an evergreen problem, right? I mean, and it's not just limited, by the way, to businesses. I think we see a lot of political greenwashing right now, or less than greenwashing, maybe. So, and this is going to become even harder and harder for us to distill that, with AI and all the tools that are out there to, make up stories. So it is, I think, one of the, big problems that are facing the world is how do we trust the information that we get? And it's not at all limited to greenwashing, by corporations here. So I put it in the category of, an uber problem for the world, to figure out how we get radical transparency. But I would say it's not a reason to say, well, we shouldn't try. And we all need to be good and smart consumers, and think about, and make conscious choices. And we need to, tell our stories in powerful ways. And Maine has a fantastic brand. That's one of the things that I love about Maine, is that we really have a trusted brand, and we can tell our stories in powerful ways, and we need to do that. So it's hard, in a world that doesn't have the kind of transparency that I would like. And this is going to be where one of the things that's going to hurt us the most is the collapse of government information. Just let me pick one example. EPA is now eliminating energy, the Energy Star program. So you could go into an appliance store and say, well, which is the most efficient refrigerator, and see the Energy Star and compare it to the other. You had information in order to make a decision, not just a fancy brochure from Frigidaire saying, oh, we make the world's best refrigerators. You could actually see, here's what the Frigidaire machine is in comparison to the LG machine, in comparison to GE's machine. Well, the absence of that kind of information from impeccable sources is going to be a huge problem for us going forward. And so that's an example of where the absence of government is really going to hurt us, and where we need to be pushing even these small examples in order to get that kind of transparency that we need.
Can I call on a student?
Of
person?
course.
Dominga.
More than one.
And sort of a similar vein, but maybe the flip side, I'm curious on your thoughts on how you shift the perception of some of these products from oh, that's for sustainability, that's for people who are big into green, instead of just seeing it as this is a great product that has a lot of applications, and makes logical sense to apply it.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great, great example because for too long, there's been and this is a story that's being fed by a lot of news media and frankly, opposition to. It's, yes, if you're willing to reduce your standards, you can have a green, solution. If you don't care about your food being insect riddled, you can have a green solution. Well, that's just total BS, frankly. These products have to compete on their merits in order to be successful. And we need to be so much better about articulating what that means. So, the fact is solar and wind are cheaper than coal. So that's why they're winning. It's not that because they're green, they're winning because they are less costly than a big coal-fired plant. And so that's an example of the merits of the product winning. Now, they didn't get there instantly. This is one of the sad things about the loss of innovation and funding is solar has been on a 20-year trajectory that's driven the cost of solar from X dollars to 100th X dollars and made it totally competitive. We're going to see the same thing with batteries, by the way. The first battery is so expensive, so clunky. We're going to see amazing things coming out of that. So competing on the merits of that. And that actually is one of the great things about business is that business can really articulate those cases and market their products to try to drive for that innovation. So it's our opportunity, I guess, to try to tell that story. And we really have to tell the story that this product is better. It's a better solution. Do you want to be warm in the winter? Do you want to live in a house that's tight and not drafty and that doesn't cost you a lot of money? Well, you should be building a passive house right now. We need to tell those kinds of stories much more effectively than we are telling them. And it's big and it's a big challenge. And this is where the forces of different disinformation, like most people in Maine believe, for example, that the high cost of electricity is because of solar. If you were to ask people on the street, they'd say, oh, it's because of all the solar. When in fact, all the studies show that the high cost of electricity in Maine is because we're dependent on natural gas. And the price of natural gas for the combined cycle electric generators is going through the roof because we're exporting so much of it to Europe to backfill against Russia's loss of gas. And so our prices are going up not because of solar, but because of natural gas spike. Now that's obscure. People don't know that. They see all the solar construction and they think, oh, well, that's the problem. When in fact, it's totally different from that. And all the studies show that, yet there's a lot of just different information coming out on stories like that. So we had a big work to tell our stories better.
So I said that we're gonna have to stop at 4, and unfortunately that's true, but anybody in the room that wants to come on up, I encourage you to do so. And then Willliam, Brenneman in the back, still has some questions that will in the chat that we'll figure out how to have you at least be aware of,
Okay.
Bill.
All right.
So let's thank Bill again one more time for a great job. Great work.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking to all of you. Have a good day.